So, before we get into the whys and the wherefores and the how do you do's, I'll start with an apology for some of the footage. The plan was to have two different views from my perspective and a camera pointing rearward to capture my brother riding behind me. Unfortunately, the GoPro 7 on the handlebars packed up at the end of day one, and the drift on my helmet developed some blurring in the top right hand corner of the frame, so the rider perspective shots aren't the best quality. Drift have been excellent and replaced the camera with a new one, and the GoPro 7 now seems to be working fine. So all good now, and lesson learned. There were also some issues with the sound recording, but more of that later. So what's the crack? The plan was for me and the missus and my brother and his missus to do an 8-day tour of the Scottish Islands and Highlands. The route would take us from home, in the northeast of England, to Dumfries, then on to Arran. From there it was up to Mull, and from Mull the route took us back onto the mainland and across to Skye. After that it was a ferry across to Lewis and Harris for a night, and from there it was back onto the mainland for a trip through the Highlands to Inverness. The last night was in Dunfermline, and from there back home. The route was changed as we went based on conditions and how we felt, but the start and end point of each day were fixed, as were the ferry journeys. Day one saw us travel the short distance up to Sunderland and my brother's for a spot of breakfast before the journey really began. After breakfast it was a ride around Newcastle and along the south bank of the Tyne to Hexham. From there it was onto the A69 to Brampton for a coffee stop. After coffee we took the A6071 to Gretna, then followed the B721 and the B724 along the coast until heading into Dumfries on the B725. The end of the first day's travelling saw us arrive slightly damp at the Holiday Inn in Dumfries. After sorting out the bikes and getting all the gear into the rooms, it was time for a few drinks and a bite to eat, followed by a few more drinks, and then it was time for bed. Day 2 started with a straightforward run from Dumfries up the A76 to Kilmarnock. From there it was on to the A71, then the A78 up to Ardrossan for the ferry to Arran. The trip around Kilmarnock proved quite eventful, as the previous night I'd realised I hadn't packed the portable hard drive for the laptop, so I wouldn't have enough space to save all the video footage from the trip. Not to worry, I thought. We go quite near the PC World in Kilmarnock, so we'll be able to call in there, buy a new hard drive and still have time to make it for the ferry. Easier said than done. After some shenanigans getting to the PC World and then finding my brother, who had gone to a different car park, my brother decided to go the wrong way off the roundabout, meaning I didn't know where he was. So we ended up going back to PC World to look for him before deciding just to head up to Ardrossan and hope he got there in time. After a few phone calls and a few stops in laybys, we both got to the ferry eventually, safe and sound. The ferry across to Brodick was smooth and straightforward. After disembarking, it was then time for a trip round the island before heading back to Brodick and the B&B. The plan had been to travel round the south of the island and then head from Blackwaterfoot across the middle of the island back to Brodick. Because of the weather, we decided to change the plan and follow the coast road around the entire island. As it turned out, this was an excellent decision, but more of that in a bit. As mentioned at the start, it's now time to talk about the sound issue. We all have Cardo Pack Talk both so we can communicate when riding. It doesn't always stop us from getting separated, as mentioned earlier, but on the whole they work well. The plan was to use a cheap Bluetooth headset as a means of recording our chat by bridging it into the Cardos. Sounds a great idea on paper, but let's just say the results were far from perfect. So the only bit of sound recording I'm going to use is this next bit, as it hopefully captures the excitement of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm watching. So, fantastic. Oh, I'm glad we're getting this road now. Oh, well. Hopefully on the camera.
Gepackt und noch paar Sachen dazu. Wir sind auf der Straße, hören Musik dazu. Du sagst plötzlich wohin und was werden wir tun? Ich sag, wir sind auf der Straße, hören Musik dazu und hören Musik dazu. Und hören Musik dazu. Und hören Musik dazu. Und hören Musik dazu.
so to Bruddock and the B&B, where further shenanigans ensued due to the nature of the B&B car park not being very flat. After deciding it was safer to leave the bikes on the road, it was time to unpack, get changed and head out for food and drinks.